She left her shift at a rural hospital in 2001. Her car was found running. She was not. March 7th, 2001 was a Wednesday, and in Meridian, Mississippi, the night shift at Lauderdale County Regional Medical Center ended at 11 o'clock. The hospital sat on the eastern edge of town, a modest facility serving a rural population spread across 3 counties. The parking lot was poorly lit at the far edges, a fact that staff had raised in internal meetings more than once without resolution. Budget reviews cited the lighting upgrade as non-essential. The request was deferred. Nurse Diane Collier was 38 years old. She had worked at Lauderdale County Regional for 11 years, beginning as a patient care technician before completing her licensed practical nursing certification in 1994. Her colleagues described her as steady, experienced, and quietly funny in the way that people become after a decade of night shifts and difficult patients. She kept a small cactus on the nurse's station counter. She remembered everyone's coffee order without being asked. She lived 12 minutes from the hospital by the route she always took, a 2-lane road that ran south through a stretch of pine forest before connecting to the residential neighborhood where she rented a house with her teenage daughter, Brianna. The drive was so familiar to Diane that she had told Brianna once that she could make it in her sleep. She had made it hundreds of times, in rain, in fog, in the thick Mississippi summers when the air sat heavy and wet against the windshield. On the night of March 7th, 2001, Diane clocked out at 11:04. A colleague named Patricia Odom walked with her as far as the main entrance before turning toward the East Wing parking area. Diane's car, a burgundy 1997 Ford Taurus, was parked in the general staff lot near the hospital's south entrance. Patricia watched her push through the door and head toward the lot. She did not watch long enough to see her reach the car. At 6:53 the following morning, Brianna called the hospital. Her mother had not come home. She had not called. She had not left a note. Her bedroom door was open and undisturbed, the bed unslept in. Brianna was 17 years old and had waited through the night telling herself there was an explanation. By nearly 7 in the morning, she had run out of explanations. Hospital staff confirmed that Diane had clocked out the previous night and had not returned. A call to Diane's cell phone went to voicemail. The number rang 4 times before the recording began, which meant the phone was on and had signal. It rang 4 times and then went silent. Meridian Police Department received the missing persons report at 7:22 in the morning. Officers were dispatched to the hospital first. Diane's burgundy Ford Taurus was located in the South Staff parking lot within minutes of arrival. The engine was running. The driver's side door was closed but unlocked. The headlights were on. Her purse was on the passenger seat. Her hospital identification badge was clipped to the sun visor where she always kept it after her shift ended. The keys were in the ignition. There were no signs of violence inside or immediately around the vehicle. No broken glass, no scattered belongings, no blood. The car had been running long enough that the fuel gauge had dropped noticeably from the level it would have been at 11 o'clock. Investigators estimated the engine had been running for approximately 7 to 8 hours. Diane Collier had walked to her car, started the engine, and then stopped existing in any verifiable record. The parking lot's single exterior camera covered the main entrance of the hospital and a portion of the north lot. The south staff lot fell entirely outside its range. No footage existed of Diane reaching her car or of anything that occurred near it after 11 o'clock on the night of March 7th. A canvass of hospital staff produced 2 individuals who had been in the south lot around the time Diane would have reached her car. A custodial worker named Jerome Watts recalled leaving the building through the south entrance at approximately 11:10 and walking to his vehicle 2 rows from where Diane's Taurus was parked. He had not noticed the car running at that point, which suggested to investigators that the engine had been started and the situation had developed either simultaneously with or shortly after his departure. A second employee recalled walking through the lot at approximately 11:15 and noticing a vehicle running with its lights on, but had assumed the driver had simply not yet pulled out and had not looked closely enough to identify the make or occupant. Those 2 accounts compressed the window of whatever had occurred to a period of approximately 5 to 10 minutes after 11 o'clock on a Wednesday night in a poorly lit hospital parking lot. Meridian police expanded the canvass to the surrounding area. Officers spoke with residents along Diane's usual route home. No one reported seeing a burgundy Taurus on the road after 11 o'clock. No one reported seeing anything unusual near the hospital that night. A convenience store located half a mile from the hospital had an exterior camera, but the footage from that date had been recorded over before investigators requested it. The case was classified as a suspected abduction within 48 hours. Diane Collier was interviewed at length by investigators. She described her mother as calm and content in the weeks before her disappearance. No unusual phone calls. No new contacts Brianna did not recognize. No financial stress beyond the ordinary pressures of a single parent working night shifts. Diane had been saving money toward a used car for Brianna, who was approaching driving age. She had been talking about taking a vacation to the Gulf Coast that summer. She had renewed her nursing certification 2 weeks earlier. Background investigation on Diane's personal life produced nothing immediately useful. She had been divorced from Brianna's father since 1995. He had relocated to Alabama and had not maintained regular contact with either Diane or Brianna for several years. Alabama authorities confirmed his presence at his workplace on the morning of March 8th. He was interviewed and eliminated as a suspect. A former boyfriend, Diane, had dated briefly in 1999, was located in Jackson, and interviewed. He had an alibi for the night of March 7th, supported by multiple witnesses at a family gathering in Rankin County. His phone records showed no contact with Diane in over a year. Investigators examined Diane's financial records. No unusual withdrawals. No unexplained deposits. Her bank account showed a paycheck deposited 2 days before her disappearance and a grocery purchase the afternoon of March 7th. Nothing after that. Her cell phone continued to ring 4 times before voicemail for 3 days after her disappearance. On the 4th day, it went directly to voicemail, indicating the battery had died. The phone was never recovered. By the end of March 2001, the investigation had reached its first significant slowdown. Lauderdale County was not a large jurisdiction. The department did not have a dedicated missing persons unit. Resources were limited and spread across an active caseload. The Mississippi Bureau of Investigation was notified and added Diane's information to the state missing persons registry. Her case was entered into the National Crime Information Center database. Brianna moved in with Diane's sister, her Aunt Ruth, in the weeks following the disappearance. She finished her junior year of high school in a state of suspended reality, the kind of functioning that is not really functioning but resembles it closely enough to get through the day. Ruth handled the practical matters. the lease on the house, Diane's belongings, the communications with law enforcement. Brianna handled nothing except the specific and relentless task of continuing to exist without her mother. The parking lot lights at Lauderdale County Regional Medical Center were upgraded the following year. The budget review cited staff safety concerns. The request was approved without deferral. The years between 2001 and 2012 did not produce answers for Brianna Collier. They produced distance, which is a different thing, and sometimes a cruelty dressed as healing. She graduated from high school in 2002 and enrolled at Mississippi State University in Starkville on a partial academic scholarship. She studied social work because she understood, in the way that people who have lost something irreplaceable understand things, that the systems designed to help people in crisis were deeply imperfect and that someone had to know them from the inside. She returned to Meridian during every university break and maintained contact with the Meridian Police Department Cold Case Unit, which had formally received the Collier file in 2004 after the active investigation was suspended due to the absence of new leads. The responses she received were consistent and carefully worded. The case remained open. No new evidence had been identified. She was encouraged to continue submitting updated contact information. That orientation, front-facing toward an exit point, was consistent with a vehicle positioned for rapid departure rather than standard parking. Harold Busby was more difficult to locate. He had moved from the neighborhood in 2004. Specialist Fontaine traced him through utility records to a rural address in Newton County. He was interviewed by phone in the fall of 2009. He confirmed having seen the dark sedan on multiple occasions. He said he had noticed it because it had no hospital parking permit displayed, which he knew because his wife worked at the facility and had complained about the permit system. He had seen the vehicle at least 4 times in the 2 weeks before March 7th. On the night of March 7th, he had seen it parked along the service road at approximately 10:30 in the evening, a vehicle positioned near a hospital parking lot on multiple evenings in the 2 weeks preceding a nurse's disappearance from that same lot. Specialist Fontaine documented the information and submitted a request to Canvas Department of Motor Vehicles records for dark-colored 4-door sedans registered to individuals with prior criminal history who resided within a 50-mile radius of Meridian. The query returned over 200 vehicles. Narrowing the list required cross-referencing with individuals who had prior convictions involving women, assault, or sexual violence. The refined list contained 31 names. Investigators conducted background reviews and preliminary interviews across the list over the following months. Most individuals were cleared quickly through alibi documentation or the absence of any connection to Lauderdale County Regional Medical Center. Several required more detailed examination. One name on the list produced a different result. Raymond Pruitt was 44 years old in 2009. He had been convicted of aggravated assault against a woman in 2004 in Kemper County, Mississippi, and had served 22 months of a 3-year sentence before release. He owned a 1999 dark blue Buick LeSabre, a 4-door sedan. He lived in Scuba, Mississippi, approximately 30 miles from Meridian. His prior conviction had occurred 3 years after Diane's disappearance, which meant he had not appeared in any criminal database search conducted in 2001. His name had not existed in the relevant records at the time of the original investigation. Background research revealed that Pruitt had worked as a medical supply delivery driver between 1999 and 2002. His delivery route had included Lauderdale County Regional Medical Center, Records confirmed he had made deliveries to the facility on at least 6 occasions between January and March 2001. He knew the hospital. He knew the parking lot. He had reason to have been present in the area during the weeks before March 7th. His DNA profile had been entered into the Combined DNA Index System following his 2004 conviction, as required under Mississippi law for individuals convicted of violent felonies. Specialist Fontaine submitted a comparison request to the Mississippi Crime Laboratory in January 2010. The unknown male profile from the swabs taken from Diane's Ford Taurus was compared directly against Raymond Pruitt's convicted offender profile. The match was confirmed at a statistical certainty exceeding 99.7%. Raymond Pruitt's DNA had been found inside Diane Collier's car. The arrest warrant for Raymond Pruitt was issued by Lauderdale County Circuit Court on February 3, 2010. Officers from the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation and Lauderdale County Sheriff's Department executed it at his residence in Scuba on a Tuesday morning. Pruitt was taken into custody without incident. He offered no statement at the time of arrest. Diane Collier received the call from Specialist Fontaine at her office in Jackson. She had been in a client meeting when her phone buzzed repeatedly against the conference table. She had excused herself, stepped into the hallway, and answered. Fontaine told her that an arrest had been made in connection with her mother's disappearance. She told her that DNA evidence had confirmed the identity of a suspect. She told her that Raymond Pruitt was in custody. Brianna stood in the hallway of her office building for a long time after the call ended. She did not immediately know what she felt. She had spent 9 years preparing herself for the possibility that an answer might arrive, and 9 years simultaneously preparing herself for the possibility that it would not. The arrival of an answer did not resolve the feeling of preparation. It simply changed what she was standing inside. She drove to Meridian that afternoon. The investigation following Pruitt's arrest focused on 2 objectives: confirming his connection to Diane's disappearance beyond the DNA match and locating Diane's remains. Pruitt refused to cooperate with investigators. He denied any involvement in Diane's disappearance. He denied having been in the south parking lot on the night of March 7th. He denied knowing Diane Collier. He offered no explanation for why his DNA was present inside her vehicle. Search warrants were executed at his residence in Scuba and at a storage unit registered in his name in Meridian. The storage unit contained items consistent with the transport and restraint of individuals, including rope, zip ties, and industrial plastic sheeting. The materials were documented and submitted to the crime laboratory for analysis. Trace evidence recovered from the plastic sheeting included fibers consistent with upholstery material from a 1997 Ford Taurus. Ground-penetrating radar was deployed across Pruitt's rural property in Kemper County, where he owned a small parcel of land he had inherited from a deceased relative in 2002. The survey identified an anomaly in the soil approximately 60 meters from the rear boundary of the property. Manual excavation under forensic supervision was conducted over 2 days in March 2010. Diane Collier's remains were recovered on the second day of excavation. Forensic analysis confirmed the identification through comparison with a DNA reference sample provided by Brianna. Diane Collier, who had clocked out of her nursing shift at Lauderdale County Regional Medical Center on the night of March 7, 2001, and had never arrived home, was found 9 years later on a rural property in Kemper County, Mississippi. Brianna was notified through specialist Fontaine, who had driven to Jackson to deliver the information in person rather than by phone. They sat in a small conference room at the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation field office. Fontaine told her what had been found and what the forensic identification had confirmed. She told her that Diane had been located. She told her that Raymond Pruitt would be charged with murder. Brianna thanked her. Then she sat quietly for a long time. Then she asked whether her mother had been alone. Fontaine told her that the forensic evidence suggested she had been, that she had not been moved multiple times, that the location was fixed and had not been disturbed since the early 2000s. Brianna nodded once. Later, she said that knowing her mother had not been moved repeatedly, had not been subjected to ongoing transportation and instability, had given her something she had not expected to need, a kind of geographic peace. The knowledge that her mother had been somewhere specific and undisturbed, even if that somewhere was wrong in every other way. Raymond Pruitt was indicted on charges of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and evidence tampering. His trial began in Lauderdale County Circuit Court in September 2011. The prosecution presented the DNA match, the fiber evidence from the storage unit, the testimony of Jerome Watts and Harold Busby, the delivery records placing Pruitt at the hospital during the preceding months, and the forensic findings from the Kemper County property. A forensic pathologist testified regarding cause of death. A behavioral analyst provided context regarding the pattern of surveillance behavior documented in the witness statements about the dark sedan. The defense challenged the chain of custody for the DNA swabs, arguing that 9 years of storage created contamination risk. The prosecution's forensic witnesses countered with documentation of the evidence storage conditions and the independence of the 2 confirmed DNA profiles within the sample. The challenge did not produce reasonable doubt in the jury. Raymond Pruitt was convicted of first-degree murder on October 14, 2011. He was sentenced to life in the Mississippi Department of Corrections without the possibility of parole. He maintained his denial throughout sentencing. He offered no statement to the court. He did not look at Brianna, who sat in the front row of the gallery for every day of the trial. Diane Collier was buried in Meridian in the spring of 2010, following the release of her remains after forensic processing was complete. The service was attended by former colleagues from Lauderdale County Regional, neighbors from the street where she and Brianna had lived, and Ruth, who had taken Brianna in after the disappearance and had sat beside her through 9 years of unanswered letters and unreturned phone calls. A small cactus from the nurse's station counter had been kept alive by a colleague who had watered it every week for 9 years without being asked. It was brought to the service and placed near the flowers. In the years following the trial, Brianna Collier did not retreat from the subject that had defined her adult life. She expanded into it. She joined the Mississippi Cold Case Coalition as a board member and began working with state legislators on evidence retention standards for biological samples collected during missing persons investigations. The policy gap that had nearly erased her mother's case, swabs collected and stored but never analyzed because no suspect profile existed yet against which to compare them, became the center of her legislative advocacy work. She argued in committee hearings and public testimony that biological evidence should be submitted for analysis regardless of whether a suspect had been identified. She argued that profiles stored in national databases grew over time, and that a comparison submitted years after an original collection could still produce a match that was not available at the time of the original investigation. She argued that the cost of analysis was not greater than the cost of a case that remained unsolved for 9 years, because a sample sat in a storage envelope waiting for a question that no one had thought to ask yet. In 2014, Mississippi enacted updated evidence submission guidelines requiring biological samples collected from scenes involving missing adults to be submitted for DNA analysis within 180 days of collection, regardless of suspect status. The guidelines were not named formally after Diane Collier, but in the internal documentation of the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation's Cold Case Division. The Collier case was cited as the primary precedent for the policy change. Brianna continued working in victim services in Jackson. She married in 2013. She had 2 children, a daughter born in 2015 and a son born in 2018. She told them about their grandmother in the specific terms of someone determined that a person not become only a name attached to an absence. She told them about the cactus. She told them about the coffee orders Diane had memorized without being asked. She told them about the Gulf Coast vacation that had been planned for that summer and had never happened. She told them that their grandmother had been a night shift nurse who drove the same road home hundreds of times and who had deserved, on the night of March 7th, 2001, to make that drive one more time. Every March 7th, Brianna drove to the hospital. The south parking lot had been expanded and resurfaced since 2001. The lighting covered every corner now. There were cameras mounted at multiple angles and motion sensors along the perimeter. The lot looked nothing like it had looked on the night her mother had walked out through the south entrance and reached her car and started the engine. Brianna parked in the far row each year. She sat for a few minutes. She did not bring flowers. She brought only the knowledge that the case that had once been suspended for the absence of a single submitted DNA sample had been resolved because someone had eventually asked the right question. And the knowledge that her mother, who had kept a cactus alive on a hospital counter for 11 years and had remembered everyone's coffee order without being asked, had not been forgotten by the daughter she had been driving home to. Diane Collier had left her shift at a rural hospital in 2001. Her car had been found running. She had not been found for 9 years, but she had been found because a 17-year-old girl had waited through the night telling herself there was an explanation, and then had spent the next 9 years making sure the explanation was found. The swabs had been sitting in a storage envelope. Someone had finally asked whether they had been submitted. That question changed everything. Thank you sincerely for taking the time to listen to today's story. In a world that moves quickly and forgets easily, choosing to stay until the end of a story like this one is its own quiet act of witness. Diane Collier deserved to come home on the night of March 7th, 2001. She did not. But she was not forgotten by the daughter who spent 9 years refusing to let the file go cold in the ways that truly mattered. What we carry from this story is this: ask the question that has not been asked yet. Evidence preserved in a storage envelope is only as powerful as the person willing to ask whether it was ever used. Systems do not fix themselves. Families who refuse to stop asking questions sometimes fix them instead. If this story stayed with you, if it reminded you that persistence and the right question asked at the right time can still reach back through years of silence and find the truth, please support this channel by pressing the like button, sharing your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribing so you do not miss the stories still to come. Your support allows these voices to reach further than they could alone. Thank you for listening.